Okay, so let me start. My name is Erkan. I'm from ECPS. At the same time, I'm researcher at the Leuven University. So today, just I'm moderating this book talk or discussion. So we have two speakers. One of them is Cengiz Aktar. Professor Aktar is the author of the book that we will talk and discuss today. He is a professor of political science at the University of Athens in Greece. He works on many topics. His research covers many topics like EU integration policies, the Turkish candidacy to European Union, the politics of memory in terms of ethnic and religious minorities, specifically the Armenian minorities living in Turkey, the history of political centralism, and specifically the international refugee law as well. And today he will share with us his main outline of his book, the Turkish Malaise. And our second speaker, who will be the discussant of today, Dirk Rochtus, who is a lecturer and political scientist at Leuven University, and he teaches international politics and also German history, German cultural history. So he has many books, many articles, including the Turkish case. So he also wrote many books on Turkey, and the last one is the Turkey, the return of Sultan. So you can imagine who is the Sultan now. So but today he will discuss with us the Cengiz Aktar's books, the Turkish Malaise, which originally written in French, La Malaise Turque, and then translated into other languages, like first in English, German, and in the next coming month, let's say, in Italian and in Armenian as well. So maybe there are other translation projects that are going on.
It was published also in Greek.
Yeah, sorry, in Greek as well. So
doesn't matter.
Yeah. So today, we will see and how where start this Turkish modernity, the Turkish identity, because it's a Malaise, and in this Malaise, it's not only about the political problems, the political culture, but it's about also this identity issue, maybe the memory as well. So it's a dilemma, and that many of the Turks nowadays live the dilemma between Europe and Asia, and so on and so forth. So the floor is yours, Professor Aktar. So
thank you, Erkan. Thank you all, to all attendees. I would like to stick to some 15-20 minutes, and my point, my idea, my challenge actually is to provoke, introduce and provoke the debate. I won't necessarily talk about the book, but I will raise 3 points. I mean, the Turkish Malaise, when I started to, at the end of the book, of course, you always name the book at the end.
You can switch speaker. Maybe Mr. Dick can start. I don't know.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea that I first give my comments on the thoughts of Cengiz, and then he will have returned in between, I hope. And after his own presentation, I can still ask some questions. I think that would be a good idea. So I must say the book is full of inspiring thoughts. And to summarize it is very difficult. It's almost impossible because every sentence in this essay matters. Yet there is one specific quote that brings me back to the year 1999 when I was visiting Turkey, and at that time I was discussing nationhood and the Kurdish issue with a Turkish colleague, and this Turkish colleague said to me, yes, everyone is able to become a Turk and to benefit from that citizenship, and in fact it would be like a kind of an acte de volonté. You confess yourself to the Turkish citizenship. But I remarked at that time that this might not be a full-fledged civic nationalism, because it's still based on the dominance of a certain ethnic group, a majority group, I must say, of course, the Turkish one. And I see my opinion of that time confirmed by what Cengiz wrote on page 24 of his essay, and I'm quoting him. Turkish national identity tends to systematically confuse national citizenship with a particularistic and ethnic definition of Turkishness, end of quote. So that notion runs like a thread through the essay. And it is already announced in the introduction, and I quote again, "The monochrome nation appeared to prevail over the rich Ottoman cosmopolitanism," end quote. So the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Republic have experienced several waves of reforms that were imposed upon the masses. And the analysis of Cengiz shows how Westernization would lead to the idea of a tightly organized state, and also exclusion of the so-called others, some specific groups. The reforms in the last decades of the empire were launched by elites which adhered to the doctrine of positivism, and laicism also characterized the elites which founded the Republic in 1923. Well, the Republic looked towards the West, towards Europe, yet as far as its internal composition was concerned, it was not as cosmopolitan as its predecessor, the empire, used to be before the invention of the Western-styled nation. And that might be explained by the traumata of the recent past. For instance, societal alienation between groups and elites, the breakdown of the empire, the defeat of 1918, and the turmoil that followed that defeat. And also surely because of the need of the state to turn the citizens of that new state, citizens who came from different backgrounds, to turn them into Turks. The new state could not afford pluralism because of its vulnerable position in a very hostile surrounding. It wanted to be strong, that means homogeneous, in order to consolidate, to survive also. And its nationalism was, in fact, as Cengiz writes, defensive. So security, güvenlik, the magic word of güvenlik, of and within the sacrosanct territorial integrity that was and is still high on the agenda of the elites and of the establishment. Although the new state, the new nation state was secular, Sunni Islam was the binding element for its citizens. And in recent times, as Cengiz notes also, it managed to supersede laicism and even Westernization, as in a kind of counter-offensive. He also writes that purge has been a constant presence in the past 2 centuries. And depending on the political circumstances, different groups became the victim of exclusion or were subject to ethnic religious cleansing. And Cengiz is also referring to the Armenian genocide as what he calls, and quote again, the mother of all taboos in these lands, end of quote. So to recognize it is a precondition to what Cengiz also calls to listen and understand the other and to begin our collective therapy. This is also a striking quote on so-called, again, quote, the vast majority of the Turkish public who wears the scars of centuries-old genocides, pogroms, and spoliations against non-Muslims, non-Sunni, and non-Turks, end quote. So in Turkey, this has internally caused a defensive attitude and externally also aggression against anyone who criticizes this injustice and who raises all these issues. The Turks are what Cengiz calls a people of the state. And they are this so much that everything which encroaches upon the authority of the state is being felt as a personal insult. Criticism of the government and the official narrative are equated with criticism of the nation. So, but in fact, we should understand that criticism and self-criticism are the entrance to enlightened thinking. We see that in a Western country, you can criticize the official policy and the official narrative, and at the same time still being seen as a patriot. It does not exclude each other. Criticism of the policy and love for the nation. Cengiz analyzes the Turkish Malaise as a consequence of the Turkish society being historically torn between state, nation, religion, the empire, and the West. And this malaise articulates itself in the present nowadays by the strengthening of the so-called totalitarian order, a situation of belligerence externally as well as internally towards the ones who think differently. And the ire of the state hits the critical individual that does not fit into the so-called national will, as the current president calls, according to Cengiz again, the masses, which are, quote, the source of his regime's legitimacy, end quote. So we could imagine populism in Turkey has turned totalitarian. So it's a rather gloomy picture that Cengiz draws in his essay. And I often have to think about what a Turkish colleague told me many years ago. It was in the beginning of the years 2000, when we passed the Anıtkabir in Ankara, and he exclaimed, "Oh, Atatürk, what has become of your republic?" So, but the essay of Cengiz, in fact, implies that the seeds of the Turkish Malaise were already sown at the start of that same republic, where, quote, the many identities inherited from the empire were buried in this artificial nation, end quote. But at the same time, Cengiz does not spare Europe. Europe that at the time of the Ottoman Empire considered the so-called Turk as a, quote, infidel conqueror because he was a Muslim, end quote. And very recent times, again, quote of Cengiz, the public opinions were massively packed with cliches, end quote. That's indeed something we still see in European countries, that people do not understand Turkey at all. and the leaders of the European states do not engage in combating these prejudices. So Europe does not know how to cope with the Malaise, with the Turkish Malaise. But that is, so we could say, in the words of Cengiz, that this Malaise is in fact mutual. That is not only Turkish Malaise, but also a European Malaise in its relationship with Turkey. To conclude my comment on the book, the essay sketches an ingraining image of a Turkey with all its wounds, its shortcomings. Is also pointing at some achievements, and how this can be explained in an historical and political way. And I would like to conclude to compare this essay with the best essays of the famous German journalist and historian Sebastian Haffner, who also knew in a limited number of pages to analyze German history with very strong insights, and that's also the case with this essay. It's an essay. It's not a book of hundreds of pages. It's counting about 80 pages, but in these 80 pages, you really get an insight into the soul of the Turkish nation and what is at stake, where it comes from, what are the deficits, but also what is the potential of that nation. And that makes this essay a very strong one, which I can only recommend to read to everyone. So that would be my comment. And of course, I hope that Cengiz might appear again so that we can have a discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dirk, for your comments and for your nice introduction, your discussion about the book, Cengiz books. So I want to continue with this, as Dirk, you opened this cultural identity based on a dominant ethnic identity that exclude other specific groups like Kurdish people, like Armenians, or non-Turkish Muslims, even some Sunni peoples as well. So they suffer also. Even the Turkish state, somehow this Turkish nationalism is bounded with this Sunni identity. But the question is, even these people, especially the Sunni people, they are suffering with this dominant ethnic identity, and as seen or perceived as a monolithic, but it's not monolithic as seen here, as seen in Turkey as well. We have many specific groups, the Kurdish people, the Alevi people, the various Sunni people, and so on. So the question is something that why you give a small, you did not make a comparison, but you give some reference to some nations in Europe, and you thought that, and you said that it's not the same. Okay, so indeed, then when you became a patriot, even you criticize the actual policies, and you become the citizens of that country, even you are coming from a different ethnic or cultural background. So can you go a little bit on that part? Why? Because nowadays this nationalist identities in Europe as well, so much more criticized, especially the ideologies represented by far-right groups nowadays.
Mm. Yes, in this sense, we could say that Turkey looks a little bit like France. So it's an acte de volonté. You're French when you confess yourself to the French state and to the French identity, and when you speak French. Whether you speak Breton or Basque or another language, as long as you keep it at home, there's no problem. And there's the same in Turkey. You can be a Kurd, you can be a Lavai, but of course you cannot pronounce this identity, let's say, in the political field. And in this sense, nothing is wrong with the civic citizenship of the civic nationalism, but it expects from the people that they assimilate, of course, and that they keep their own identity their particular identity very discreet in the background. And that's in fact the precondition to be a full-fledged citizen. But as soon as you demand group rights, then you will get problems in such a kind of state. So if in France, for instance, the Bretons would say, we want more cultural autonomy, or we want that Breton is speaking in the parliament, yeah, then you will also get a problem in France. It's not only a problem in Turkey or an issue in Turkey. Whereas in other European countries, okay, you have, let's say, more acceptance of this other identities in the public sphere. That's a difference. For instance, in Germany, you have a Danish-speaking minority. Well, this Danish-speaking minority as members in the parliament of a certain federated entity. But I must admit, they will not speak Danish there. But another case.
Here I am. Here I am. I don't know where, I don't want to cut you, but you can continue, but I would like simply to know where you stopped hearing me.
Okay, we will continue with you, Professor. Let's finish the Dirk.
All right, very well. Excuse me.
I think I've said the most things. I mean, civic nationalism means okay, you have an act of volunteer, you can become a member of the state or the society as long as you assimilate and you do not demand collective right groups. So the issue is there's a difference between individual rights. Okay, you can have them, you can speak Kurdish in the street, but as soon as you demand it in the public sphere, then you will get a problem in a strongly centralized state like Turkey. But as I made the comparison, it will be the same case in France. Okay, that's in fact to summarize, but I think it would be interesting to, of course, and that's the intention that we listen to Cengiz, and then I will ask some questions. Okay, because I've already given my comment, Cengiz.
Okay, thank you.
I've already given my comment on your essay.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? So I missed it. Excuse me. I'm very sorry for this.
I can send it by email to you later on if you want.
Definitely, yes. Thank you. I'm sorry for this. I don't know why. I mean, it's the first time that it happened to me, and but I mean, yeah. Anyhow, no. But I was trying to make three points, and I will repeat them. The first one, Turkish authoritarianism is more than an authoritarianism because it has a mass support. And this mass support is critical. We cannot just simply play with this, competitive, authoritarianism or illiberal democracy, betting on the elections, and which presuppose that the elections will come with a political alternative, and the regime and the regime cronies and the system which was set up by the regime will just disappear with the elections. No, it's more than that, because this regime has a mass support, the mass support that it never had in the history of the Turkish Republic. We take two very authoritarian periods, 1908, 1918, the Ittihadist era, and the Kemalist / İnönü one-party regime, 1923 to 46. These were openly dictatorial, if not, authoritarian eras. They never had a public support. They never had, masses, cheering them. Not at all. It was, they were trying to transform the society. They were imposing things to the Turkish society, but by force, actually. In the case of the regime today in Turkey, it has a very strong mass support. And some observers now are trying to decipher, to understand how come on the earth, you know, with so many problems, with so many economic problems, political problems, external problems, you know, a vast, I mean, nothing works in Turkey, frankly, nothing works. I mean, it's such a, despite this regime has something like 30% of the vote still. Of course, there is the economic clientelism. You know, the regime is paying subsidies to some 17 million. That's the official figure. It's a lot to people who don't work at all and receive, you know, subsidies in kind or in cash, etc. But that doesn't explain all. You know, this is the first observation that I wanted to share with you. The second one is the weakness of the institutions and in general of the Turkish society. You know, when in 2013, Erdogan feared the same fate as Mursi, and when he got the first you know, indications that the same things may happen to him through the Gezi upheaval, you know, multiplied with the revelations of the December 2013, so he completely changed his way of ruling, his way of being, actually. You know, he got afraid. And then, you know, things accelerated, as we all know. Came the 2015 elections, completely tricked. The 2016, the so-called coup d'etat. 2017, the referendum. The 2018, again, you know, non-free, non-fair elections, where he got finally elected and established a Turkish-style presidential system without checks nor balances. So, what was the reaction of the arch-old Turkish institutions? What was the reaction of the famous Turkish civil society? Zilch, nothing. I mean, you know, they disappeared. I mean, you know, they started to obey, and they, you know, they bowed to the strong man so quickly that today, you know, in Turkey, the main institutions that exist in every country, like, you know, the army, the judiciary, the academia, the foreign service, the treasury, and the administration of the territory, with the governors and sub-governors, etc. All these main institutions that exist in every functioning country, it has become sub-offices of the presidential palace. So all the nominations, all the appointments, all those, you know, those who are running the country and taking decisions, actually they are not taking any decisions, they are applying the decisions which are taken at the presidential palace. So there is a wreckage, there is such a wreckage of institutions that it will be extremely difficult to, you know, to kickstart them again if one day there is a political alternative in the country. The same goes for the Turkish society. The Turkish society didn't open the mouth. I take Albert Hirschman. I mean, there is no rise to civilian protest. The only one was Gezi, and full stop. We stopped there. I mean, even the Belarusians, even the Russians, and even Ukrainians for sure are protesting. Who is protesting in Turkey? Can you tell me? Okay, you can argue that 2 million plus people left the country, and there is no one left to protest. It's a bit like in Venezuela, which lost 10% of its population. 3 million plus people left. Of course, it can be an explanation, but even for those who remain behind, and we know them many, they just don't open the mouth. So this is something very peculiar. This is something which I read as a consequence of what happened at the invention of the Turkish nation, of the creation of the republic, and which was based, as I call it, on this founding evil of the Armenian genocide. Because my equation is quite simple. A society which never responded to what happened 100 years ago is not only sick by definition, but also can swallow much more than this genocide. What is the weight of the embezzlement and the graft that Erdogan and his entourage was accused of, compared to 1.5 million Armenians who were killed 100 plus years ago? It's nothing. I mean, it's, if you can swallow this, if you can accept this, if you cannot reckon with it, you can accept any evil, and this is a fundamental problem, I think. And this contempt for the rule of law that exists in Turkey. The Turks don't really like the rule of law. They always go through the law. They always find a way bypasses it, you see. So this contempt for the rule of law dates back to this founding evil. And the third point I would like to make is how come, and there I think the similarities with Russia are really very, very, significant. Turkey was, until 2010, 11, was a country which was functioning very well. Actually, it was a rising star. It was, there were think tanks. This Dirk very well. I mean, there was an interest on Turkey. We were talking about, the Muslim democracy. We were talking about, how come these Turks managed to, being Muslims, accepted to go towards European membership, EU membership. I mean, so everything was for Turkey, and people were, pushing, elbowing each other, to go and invest there. So no one in the world was pushing Turkey in the other direction, but the regime. The regime suddenly, decided to change track. And in my opinion, I mean, what I described as fear of Erdogan, etc. I mean, that doesn't explain everything, really. I mean, it's deeper than that. I mean, Turks really committed, in a way, a collective suicide, exactly like Russia to today. And I mean, Russia was awash of hard currencies. They were selling anything. The money was flowing in. They were so rich and affluent, and also, you know, they started to have their say in Libya, in you know, in Syria, etc. You know, they became a partner, of course, thanks partly to the Germans, you know, who were the main enablers of the Russians. Same with Erdogan, by the way. You know, the best friend of Erdogan and the best friend of Putin was the former chancellor, you know, and the German social democrats. You know all this, Dirk. So this points at you know, in terms of political science, but in terms of political sociology, that points an anomaly. I mean, this country, you know, the totalitarianism of Russia and the totalitarianism of Turkey didn't grow out of a problematic of you know, environment like in the early 20th century in Italy, Germany, and Russia. You know, there were billions of problems, and the you know, the totalitarian answer came on the top of it. Whereas in today's Turkey and today's Russia, completely to the opposite, you know, the things were actually, for Turkey, it's even worse than in Russia, because Turkey was a relatively democratic country, you know, and you know, asking the right questions, challenging the past. You know, there was a very vivid and radical and you know, vocal civil society, and suddenly the entire you know, edifice, the entire you know, dream, I would say, has collapsed. So these are the 3 points that I summarized, and I started to summarize. Now it's you heard me, and now we can maybe open the floor. And but I really wanted to hear, maybe you can summarize in three words your points also, so that I know, Dirk, your points.
Well, it's you're really striking the point where the problem of the society lies. The weaknesses of the institutions. So we see that, in fact, 100 years of republic, of the existence of the republic, did not help to bring forward a strong parliamentary system. I think that there is the problem. There's not a real strong opposition. Democracy means that you have the possibility as a citizen to change out the elites. That democracy means that the rulers can disappear one day and will be replaced by other rulers, of course, in a democratic way. And in fact, this has not happened in Turkey. And we see that in the first 2 decades of the republic, there was not even a real opposition party. Okay, for a few years there was something, but that was facade. But after, and then continuing after the Second World War, there was still always the same elite that was ruling. Okay, except with the period of the 50s when you had the Democrat Party. But the problem is that you have always had the same establishment, the same elites ruling. In fact, the Kemalist elites from the founding of the Republic until, let's say 2002, when you got another group, in fact, the former opposition, which became now also like a stronghold, which did not want to give room to, again, another opposition. So that's a problem. You don't have a real parliamentary system. Okay, you have it in name, there's a parliament, but it is not filled with life. There are discussions, but the institutional binding is weak. There's not a control of the rulers by the parliament. And it has also to do with the fact that in Turkey, do you have real parties like in other countries? I mean, parties in Turkey are centered around the person. A person creates a party, and then might change the essence of that party again. It's always written on the person of a certain leader who creates a party around himself. Yeah, so that is that institutional weakness. No real parliamentary system, no possibility to change out the elites, the rulers, and yeah, opposition is not in fact respected in that sense. Society will never responded. That's true. But exactly because there was not a possibility to voice your opposition through the institution of the parliament, that makes it dangerous to voice your dissent. Well, you say also the regime will not disappear. Yeah, that's of course we can ask something about that because the present regime anyway, is centered around again this certain person, the leader, the charismatic leader. So the question is, what would happen if the charismatic leader would disappear one day? Would you still have the same regime, or would it become a chaotic situation where several subgroups would battle with each other? That's also something we don't know. Would it fall apart? We have now the ruling party. Would it fall apart in several branches? But that does not do away with the problem that even if that would happen, you still don't have a real strong parliamentary system. Yeah, fear. People are fearing. Or you say it's much more than just fear. That's true. But we should not forget, real democracy means, and I would like to define democracy by that, democracy means the absence of fear. The moment that you don't, you fear to express yourself, then you don't live in a democracy, or not in a full-fledged democracy anyway. You say, yeah, the last real protest was Gezi, 2013, that's true. But what about that march that the CHP organized some years ago? When was it again? 2017, I guess. The march from Ankara to Istanbul, led by the leader of the CHP, with the 1 million people who raised their voice and marched. That was also a kind of mobilization of the protest. And yeah, I saw also in the year 2015, in June 15, with the elections of that time, June 2000, a glimpse of hope in the sense that for the first time you got a real opposition. Okay, you had CHP, but also the HDP, which was also chosen not only by Kurdish people, but also by liberal Turks. So yeah, to summarize. You're right. It has to do with the absence of a real parliamentary system and a party system too, as well.
Erkan?
So, do you want to add something to?
No. Let's go to the Q&A and.
Yeah. Okay. Let's open the Q&A session now. So, or any remark from the audience, if you want to ask some questions, or Hafsa, yes, please.
More than a remark, I want to ask. I don't know if there is a concrete answer to that, but I want to ask your idea about. You laid out a very pessimistic picture, actually, and as I understand, the problem is actually not the dictator himself, but the society. You talked about the mass support, which means that there is a pathetic society in front of us in terms of not standing against the dictatorship as long as they are affected by it directly. So I'm thinking that if the society is like that, you talked about the Russian people's protest against the dictatorship or one-man rule through the other countries, even not in the country itself. I see that in Turkey right now, just the feminist movements or the first people are somehow in a very limited way protesting the ongoing dictatorship, but their interests and concerns are divided, so they cannot come together standing against the dictatorship. I think that's the thing that weakens them, their concerns. So if it is that way, can a democratic means solve the problem? I mean, the elections or other stuff, because this pathetic society, I don't know how it's become resolved.
Let's take the other questions also.
Yeah.
Maybe they are related. It's better.
Yeah, so I want to ask also. So Alexander, do you want to continue? Alexander, please.
Okay, thank you. By the way, hocam merak etme, kaybolduğun zamanı ben aradım.
Okay, very well.
I have sent in the PMS personal message. Anyway, yes, we are a bit worried because the time is very, very difficult in Athens as well. In any case, hocam, I would like to ask you one question about the artificial rifts or cleavages which Erdogan is created in order to polarize the Turkish society. Both Senem Korkmaz and Düzen Aizgid, and as well the Greek version of your colleague Ahmet İnsel said that Erdogan is creating a kind of artificial rifts, division in the Turkish societies between, let's say, ethnical one, between Kurds and Turks, let's say religious one, between the Pious people and or cultural one, between the Black Turks or the White Turks, in order to exploit these artificial cleavages and to win the election. Can you predict, if you have the crystal ball, what is going to be the next, let's say, brinkmanship from the next year election?
All right, very well. Thank you.
Do you want me to continue to take the questions?
Yeah.
Elliot, please.
Elliot,
you are the next one. Elliot Underhill.
Yes, hocam, I'm not Elliot. My name is Aaron, and I also have a question about the entire essay, because while reading it, I noticed that there was a lack of mention of the 2010 referendum. So I was because I always saw it as the beginning of the end for Turkish democracy, because it gave total power to the Turkish government to appoint the people who would pick the judges. So I was wondering if you would think that it played an important part.
2010, you mean?
Yeah, 2010, because like I see that the start of your paper was in 2013. So I was also wondering what kind of a role Erdogan's authoritarianism played a part with using his democratic means.
Okay, very well.
İhsan Çolak, please.
And let's go to İhsan.
Hi, Cengiz hocam.
Thank you.
My question is very basic and simple. Do you think this is the success of Turkish establishment of Turkish authoritarianism? Because everybody has can find a space when beating the other, depending on the term, the time. If you are not, the only exception is Kurds, I believe, because they have no space in the establishment. So, and do you think that this is kind of the success of intentional establishment? That's my question.
Well, I mean, let's start with the İhsan's point. Actually, it's more than a question. I think it's an observation, and I think you have a point. Yes, and it relates to the question and interrogations of Hafsa also. Yes, today Turkey is going through the victory. Let's name it. I mean, the victory of a non-democratic system to which the majority of the population adheres, to which a majority of the population is in agreement with, unfortunately. This is the Turkish reality today. I'm not talking about, it goes beyond this 30% of the AKP voters. It's much more than that. I gave you the example. I mean, I don't know if I said that, but I mean, it's worth mentioning how this so-called yerli and milli, local and national opposition, how this opposition is on the same wavelength when it comes to Kurds, when it comes to the foreign adventures, when it comes to, homophobic, for instance, the laws or attitudes, and this is, I mean, the society in a way is in peace with itself when it comes to authoritarianism. Everyone likes that in one way or another. I mean, people are cherishing this new useless Çanakkale Bridge, for instance. It's totally useless. It's a waste of money. It killed, I don't know how many, thousands of hectares of, good arable land but everybody's happy with that. They are just discussing who will pay it. That's not the point. It's much more complicated than that. Yes, and to go from there to to this doom scenario that Hafsa just mentioned, because you basically said, Hafsa, what is next? Well, I mean, frankly, I don't know what is next. It is definitely not the election as many people tend to think. And, in one way or another, this regime will go and will be replaced by, in one way or another, by another political power. I don't know who, which parties will be in it, but things will change from day one to day two. No, of course not. And this is the reason why I particularly mentioned this, the wreckage of the institutions. The Turkish institutions are, almost dead and buried. They don't exist anymore. Everything is decided at the presidential palace. And what remains as bureaucrats, they are obedient servants of the presidential palace, and they just apply what the ukazes, what the orders are from the presidential palace. So, I mean, imagine a change of the regime. Imagine a new government, just one, for the sake of, the case scenario. Okay, I mean, how they can reestablish, this or kickstart these wreckages. I mean, take the judiciary, take the army, take the academia. Take the foreign service. I mean, they hardly exist anymore, There are 3 or 4 people in the presidential palace who decide about anything and everything. So it's not, and what about the society? And the society is, of course, naturally in an expectative mode, because everybody, or at least they pretend so, is sick and tired of this regime. This is the longest tenure of the post-46 period. It's the longest one, definitely, 22 years, it's a lot. So everybody pretends that they have enough. And what is next? Do we know the content, what is in this wreckage? What is the what is the damage? Do we have a list of things to be done? will go, a new regime will come. No, we don't even know the extent of the damage, because there is no, no one took note of what really happened. So, I mean, these are very, it's not, political philosophy. These are facts. These are facts and figures, unfortunately, Hafsa. So, from there, within this framework, to go to Alexandros's question regarding the artificial rifts, this is an observation that you make, trying to explain through these rifts, the social rifts, the power position of Erdogan for the present and for the future, namely the elections. Well, I'm afraid these rifts, Alexandros, are not artificial. These rifts exist. These rifts always existed. What Erdogan did is to dig more on them, to exacerbate them, so to be able to use them and abuse them. This is otherwise, the fundamental. There are many fundamental rifts in the Turkish society, but one of the top ones, of course, is between Turks and Kurds. There's no doubt about that. So this is not an artificial rift. It always existed, and in the eyes of a Turk, be it a white Turk or a black Turk, a Kurd is a Kurd. It's a second-class citizen, exactly like the non-Muslims who were who were second-class citizens before they disappeared. It's exactly the same thing. So this is not an artificial rift. The same with among the Sunnis and Shia, Alevis, of course. This is not an artificial rift. It always existed. Now there is a new one. Within the Sunni group, you have the Gülenists and the non-Gülenists. This is not an artificial rift. All the so-called non-Gülenist Sunnis adhere to what the regime tells them about how evil are or were the Gülenists. So these are not artificial things. I mean, he didn't invent them. He's using it. He's abusing it, and he will continue to do so. And finally, regarding the question of this 2010 referendum, frankly, I wrote a piece about this some time ago. I mean, I wrote many pieces about this because, Islam, or political Islam, it was not called like this, of course, at the time, was kicked out from the very heart of the state in the beginning of the 19th century with first westernizing reforms with Mahmud II. It's not something new. So this is a 200 years old process through which political Islam tried to come back, and it managed to come back in 2002 fully with the AKP getting to the power alone. So this when those observers point at the referendum of 2010 and the control of the judiciary by the Gülenists or by the political Islam in general, whatever, I mean, this is, a microbe. This is, zilch, nothing compared to this 200 years old process or I wouldn't say revenge, but I mean, it was a political struggle to come back in the very heart of the first Ottoman and then Turkish state. So, I mean, it's just a little step, you know, in this big struggle that existed starting the day the Islam was, you know, pushed out of the main top decision-making mechanisms of the Ottoman Empire. And there, one key date is definitely the abolition of the Janissaries in 1826, which was a fundamental event in the sense that it, it annihilated, the Bektashism, which was a Sunni sect, of course, but which was a very important, force to ensure the equilibrium in the very heights of the Ottoman state. So the Naqshbandiya remained alone afterwards, and there were no more counterpower, in the decision-making mechanisms of the early 19th century Ottoman Empire. So 2010, just I repeat, a step, a small step, yes.
Okay, thank you, Cengiz. So do you want to continue, Dirk?
Yes.
Because we want to finalize, but before
Cengiz,
finalizing, I want to give it the
some words. You spoke about the victory of non-democracy, and indeed, the question is whether a return to democracy is possible. When we look at the defining elements of democracy, it does not look probable. What is democracy? Let's define it very shortly. First thing, as I already mentioned, it means the absence of fear. Secondly, means the possibility to actually change the elites. And thirdly, and that's the point also, the existence of pluralism. And it does not sound like there is being something like plural society in Turkey, at least in the public sphere. As you already mentioned, the national will. And it sometimes looks to me as if Turkey is a kind of union sacrée. I mean, with that, in an historical analogy, let's look at 1914. At the eve of the First World War, you had the people in France rallying around the leaders. It was called Union Sacrée. In Germany, it was called Burgfriede. We are all Germans, or nous sommes tous Français, and we are rallying around the flag because there was a war coming. Of course, at the moment, Turkey is not in a hot war, so to say, but in fact, it is in an invisible war with the outside world. And that creates a feeling among the people, or the leaders exploit it. We must combine our forces because Turkey is surrounded. And there's always a constant in the history of Turkey, the feeling we have enemies. The Turks don't only have one friend, a Turk. So it looks like the leaders are exploiting this feeling. We are living in a war, an invisible war, with the outside world. And that makes, I think, that people rally around the charismatic leader who will save the nation.
Absolutely. No, you have definitely a point. I mean, this cult of personality is extremely important. And I often refer to Wilhelm Reich, the desire of fascism. And this is what we are in it. It's not just a power struggle among the social classes and, an external force which, pushes the Turkish society towards this. No, it's the Turkish society which desire you know, in its majority, this sort of autocratic, totalitarian, whatever, but at the end of the day, non-democratic government and rule, and is happy with it, exactly like in Russia. And those who are not happy, they just go out. You know, they just get out. You know, I very often refer to Albert Hirschman, you know, who defined this three fundamental, you know, human reaction in front of a problem. The first one is the loyalty. You bow, okay, you accept. The second one, you don't accept and you rise. You rise, you protest, okay? And the third one, you exit. You just go out. And the name of his book is, you know, Loyalty, Rise, and Exit. So this is, I mean, in Turkey, there was a rise with Gezi here and there. There are some, you know, protests still going on in Boğaziçi University, for instance. You know, yes, but I mean, what is their impact, frankly, to transform this, you know, sleeping society, because the Turkish society is literally sleeping. You know, it's accommodating itself to the reality of this one-man rule and trying to make a living out of this. I mean, mind you, Turkey today is probably one of the very few societies where there was no mass support for Ukrainians who are receiving the Russian missiles on their head. It's one of the few countries in the world. And it's just next door, you see. So this, in that sense, you know, it's unfortunately the future to me, sorry, Hafsa, the future to me looks very, very bleak, I'm afraid, you know. Bülent.
Thank you very much for this eye-opening and striking presentation, Cengiz Hoca, and the vivid discussions. Thanks to Dirk. Yes, the same question actually with Hafsa. I also think that it is so pessimistic outlook, but you define in your book and your presentation that the cases in Turkey is not be defined as illiberal democracy or competitive authoritarianism. And it is these concepts are not sufficient to define the Erdogan regime, and you define this regime as totalitarianism, as you said in your presentations, or fascist totalitarianism, by basing on the fact that the regime has been supported by the majority of the people unconditionally. By analyzing the negative role played by the masses in all past mass persecutions, targeting the regime's others, that we have numbers of others, and we are so skillful to produce new others, unfortunately.
Yes.
Now Turkey seems to be totally hopeless. Could you say that Turkey is now totally hopeless and even a lost case in regard of democratic norms and values, universal principles related to rights and freedoms, separation of powers, checks and balance, rule of law, transparency, etc.? You said that the future is bleak, but which future we are talking about? The next generations, the generations after the next generations, or what is the future? And I also want to ask about the role of the economy. You know, these kind of regimes, if the countries has no natural resources, you know, they have no chance to survive against all dire conditions. And now the Turkish society is going through an economic crisis. What the economic elements or factors play role, both the rise of Erdogan and maybe the decline of Erdogan? What do you think? Thank you.
You know, there are several questions within all these. Bülent, thank you. You know, when I refer, for instance, to the EU process of Turkey, and there are many hopefuls and reformists in Turkey and outside Turkey who point at this, you know, on the paper candidacy and expect that it may be revived one day, you know, as soon as there is something which they consider as conducive to, you know, to Europe and to the West and to the nestle of the West, etc. They start to, you know, think also in Europe and in the West in general, you know, they start to immediately think positively and you know, hoping that the regime will reform itself or will at least take a new track, you know, towards to save itself. By the way, there's a, you know, I never bought in this kind of you know, optimism, and the reason is very simple, because this regime exists or is, you know, exists or can survive on the condition that it rejects and functions against the norms, standards, values, and principles of the democratic world. It's not the other way around. I mean, imagine today this regime applying, you know, the rule of law, for instance, applying, you know, the becoming transparent in the public auctions, for instance, you know, to take an economic example, or to release Osman Kavala and Selahattin Demirtas, for instance. The regime will collapse. This regime won't function anymore, you know. So the system is based in the anti-democracy. Therefore, this regime is not reformable. You know, that is what people have difficulties to understand. It is not a reformable regime. It is not a simple deviation from the norm, which can be redressed with, you know, with a new election or whatever. Not only the regime, you know, cannot be reformed, but the society and the majority of the population who support directly or indirectly this regime is not useful to transform the misdoings of this regime. Take the invasion of Rojava, for instance, of the Syrian Kurdistan. Take it's very simple. I mean, there is not one single, you know, opposition party, with the exception of the Kurdish party, who talks about, you know, who says openly, yes, we will immediately get out of Syria because this is the occupied land. You know, they don't talk. They don't even mention it. Not only the opposition parties, but Hafsa just mentioned how vocal and how active and you know, and efficient are the feminist groups in Turkey. Well, you know, there are widespread, you know, illegal activities, you know, against Kurdish women in occupied territories in Syria that no feminist group is advocating against. Not one. I mean, this is the problem. You know, they don't see it. They don't see it because they are Kurds, because they are not interested in this kind of things. These are very harsh realities, but it tells you a lot about the future that is waiting for the country. As for the economy, Bülent, you know, this regime didn't grow up from, I mean, did grow up indeed, I mean, or consolidated its strength on a redistribution mechanism, which really encompassed the vast majority of the Turkish population, and Turkey has, you know, met the mass consumption society with the political Islam. Let's call a cat, okay? There's no doubt about that. But you know, the system that was set up, I mentioned the figure of 17 million citizens who are living without working, you know, with the governmental subsidies in kind or in cash. Yes, there is a risk for this regime to lose its power base, its constituency, if the economy continues that way. But let's be very cautious there, because the economic hardship didn't start now. You know, the economic hardship actually started in 2013, and it's going in this direction. You know, it's going down, it's diving down, and still this party has a 30% of the vote. And I mean, I am shocked, and maybe I'm not supposed to be shocked with this, you know, interviews in the streets where people are queuing to buy cheap bread, and the journalists ask the lady or the man, so you are queuing, are you happy with the government? The guy is queuing, it's raining or snowing. I mean, he or she is in a dire situation. He says, yes, I will still vote AKP. I'm very happy with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I mean, there is something, you know, this is not normal. This is something which should make us think twice about the future and about the possibilities of the Turkish society, the opportunities of the Turkish society to transform itself.
Let's take the last question.
No, there are three.
There are three, but we come to the end. This is the question. So,
I actually,
okay,
can I continue?
Yeah, but I have any sense. If you can resume in a very short way, then I can take it. Please, Alexander,
I'm going very short. Anyway, Hocam, because the name of discussion last year, it was the post-Erdoganism Turkey. And actually, I would like to refer to the Ukrainian crisis, or the against Putinism and its adventure, how this major and cataclysmic event can act as a change of paradigm for Erdogan, both in the internal affairs, I mean, that to try to mend its relationship with the EU, and of course that is going to be reflected in human rights and the internal situation in Turkey, or let's say in external affairs, as he tried to normalize his relation with United Arab Emirates, Israel, Egypt, let's say in Greece, and so on. Let's be more optimistic or pessimistic. I don't know if this event is going to be
very quickly. I mean, he doesn't realize the real extent of this war. I don't think he really got they got the point, and it's a major upheaval, and it will affect not only Turkey but the entire world. But I'm not sure they are capable of evaluating properly the effects on Turkey in the region, and the relationship of Turkey with Russia and NATO. But at least for the time being, you know, the war has sort of half consolidated the return of Turkey to NATO, which was expected, but it doesn't mean that, you know, they will sever the ties with Russia. I don't think that this balancing act, as we call it, is sustainable. It's absolutely not sustainable. It will crack sometime. And the worst thing is the ethical part of it. Turkey today, the regime is acting as like a vulture, you know, literally like a vulture, calling for the Russian money to come in and come invest, blah, blah. And they really didn't realize what is really going on and what will be going on in the decades to come with this major cataclysm.
And
Ihsan is a question, but Hafsa is summing up, I think. No?
Yeah, Ihsan Bey was on the line before me.
Okay, very well. Ihsan, yes.
You're muted, Ihsan Bey. You're still muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my question is about future hope about Turkish democracy. So researchers and literature shows that democracy is not a natural thing. You know, it needs efforts. So, and we have an experience, and you know, a German experience actually, educating the foundations, educating their own societies, not the other people, their own people. So maybe Dirk can contribute that too. What would you think about this kind of efforts?
Can I combine my question with his, because it's very similar, it's very parallel?
Yep.
Can I?
Of course.
So, we are on the same page that Erdogan is not the reason, he is the result. I mean, it's the tip of the iceberg, you know.
Absolutely.
So I know that you don't know the answer to the question, what is next, but in terms of hopeless, you know, future of the situation, isn't there anything that we can do, we should do, you know, in terms of United Nations or educating the society, who we have to address?
You know, 2 points. I think Turkey had a golden opportunity, a historic chance with the EU membership process to go through this, to actually to solve its problems without a major, you know, cataclysm, without a civil war, for instance, without, you know, a major upheaval in the country, I mean, but didn't manage to properly, you know, understand and value the EU process, and missed the opportunity, I'm afraid. And this is this is one point that is not reflected sufficiently upon among the Turkey watchers, be it in Turkey or outside Turkey. Ihsan Bey pointed at the case of Germany. You know, Germany lost the war and was imposed all sorts of, I would say, democratic behavior and not only behavior, but also, you know, institutions. And this is how it survived and it became what it became. And Turkey first lost the war and catch up or caught up with Lausanne Treaty. So Lausanne Treaty actually was important. It's one of the founding acts of the Turkish society, of the Turkish Republic. But never forget that the Lausanne Treaty, you know, has kind of has made sure that the founding evils of the Turkish Republic were hidden under the carpet, and in particular the Armenian genocide. Never forget this. So it's a missed opportunity. I mean, the Lausanne Treaty and which followed afterwards didn't lead to the invention of a democratic republic in Turkey, unfortunately. No, and it has created another, you know, nation state with all its ills that are coming out and off, you know, now on the surface today and which are making this country absolutely, in my opinion, unmanageable.
Word. In fact, for a good functioning democracy, you need also a strong middle class, which is politically aware and wants to contribute to democracy. But in fact, in Turkey, we have something like Bonapartism, a situation where the middle class is giving away the will to function in the political sense and gives it away to the leaders. And in this case, Erdogan is a kind of Bonaparte. That's a system of Bonapartism.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I would like to thank you for everyone, specifically for our two speakers and discussants, Dirk, Rochtus, and Professor Cengiz Aktar. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I hope to see you again for other events, and thank you for all audience as well. Thank you again.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.